Welcome to the FamilyLife Blended podcast. I'm Ron Deal. We help blended families and those who love them to pursue the relationships that matter most. I'm joined today in the FamilyLife Blended studio by Gayla Grace. So nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Gayla's here a bunch on this podcast, but today she's here because we are celebrating our 100th episode. We're going to take people behind the scenes. We're going to tell you a little bit about how this thing gets produced. We're going to back way up and tell you how FamilyLife Blended came to be in the very first place. And Gayla and I are going to do some reflecting on some of our favorite podcasts and guests and some of the things that we've discussed over the years. This is really going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for being here.
Yes, good to be here.
Now, there's reason why we're celebrating with you today, and it has to do with you, the listener. Because here's the bottom line. I mean, think about this. We wouldn't have a podcast. We wouldn't have 100 episodes if you weren't still listening to them. Obviously, we've hit 100 because you're still here. So thank you for hanging with us and being a part of this. Whether you've just listened to one of our podcasts, all of them, we wouldn't be here without you. So you're really a part of this as well. And did you know, Gayla, that 100 episodes is really not common?
I didn't know that.
We looked into it a little bit, started looking at some of the numbers. First of all, there's over 2 million podcasts.
That's a lot.
I mean, I listen to a lot, but I don't listen to that many.
2 million.
Okay. So according to Apple Podcasts, 26% of podcasts have only published one episode.
That seems crazy. That's a lot of work.
It's somebody, I guess, had a good idea, thought it would go great.
It was probably more work than they realized.
I think you're exactly right. This is more work than we realized.
Exactly, it is.
And yet we're staying after it. Get this. 37% have only done one or two podcasts, episodes, I should say, in their podcast.
Right.
And then they call it quits. 44% of podcasts have 3 or less episodes. 36%, about a third, have produced 10 or more episodes for their podcast. Now, I'm willing to bet most get to 10, 15, 20. But looking at those stats and how it progresses downward, I don't think many actually get to 100.
No, not at all. That's why it's a big deal.
Yeah. So it really is a big deal to get to 100. Plus, now listen to this, based on the number of our downloads and unique listeners that we have tuning into this podcast, FamilyLife Blended is in the top 10% of all podcasts that were ever made. Top 10% of the 2 million that are out there.
Yay us.
Yeah. Yeah. And yay God, right?
Right.
That's my wife's slang. I love the way she says it. Yay God.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like, this is really cool. We hoped when we started this that it would make a difference in people's lives, but we didn't have any idea if people would listen.
Right.
If we could garner an audience, if people would share it with other people. There's a lot of things in there that we just didn't know about, but obviously it's happening. So again, thank you for being with us and being a part of this. We celebrate with you that we're reaching this 100th episode. Okay, so we're going to jump into all that today. Before we do that, let's just acknowledge, Gayla, it's December.
It is.
Christmas is almost here. It's time to get serious about the Christmas season, the party and the travels and all the stuff you got to arrange for your family.
And it's more complicated in a blended family.
Yep. Haven't we done an episode?
We have.
I think maybe we have.
We have.
Of course we have.
And it's a good one because there's so many complicated dynamics at the holidays for blended families.
That's right. It's very good. So here's the thing. Christmas is here. And I just want to remind you to make sure you put Christ into your Christmas. Just combat all of the marketing and stuff that people want to throw at us in the holiday season, and make sure you and your kids have some really good conversation.
And I always like to say you might need to apply some grace as a blended family at the Christmas season, because there's lots of things that can go wrong and ways that you can get your feelings hurt, and just put grace at the top of your list.
Put on some thick skin. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Also, December, a lot of people make a year-end donation to their favorite 501c3, which Family Life is. So, of course, any gift that you might give us specifically for Family Life Blended, which you can do, you can just designate that gift for Family Life Blended. That supports this podcast and all the other things that we do, live events, virtual events, products, resources, all the stuff that we do. Gayla out speaking, I'm out doing some things. Right. If you want to help with that, this is a great time of year. We really would appreciate that. Just contact Family Life. Again, the show notes will tell you how you can go about doing that. I got to tell you, maybe you're also thinking about what comes next. So I got an email from a woman named Erica. She says this, she's thinking ahead, right? What are they going to do? And maybe our listeners, January is on your mind a little bit. Erica says, I recently got engaged and my fiance and I are interested in premarital counseling. We have both been married. I'm a 41-year-old widow with a 14-year-old daughter. My fiance is 40 and divorced without children. We want some solid guidance so that we can make our union last for the rest of our lives. Well, I wrote her back and I said, hey, go to your pastor. I hope they'll be supportive and helpful. If he's not aware of resources, we have Preparing to Blend. I'm actually doing a virtual couples group for engaged couples in January of 2023. That starts Thursday nights, January and February. If you're interested, look it up on the show notes. It'll tell you how you can be a part of that. Of course, we do premarital counseling training for pastors and leaders and mentor couples in how to use Preparing to Blend. That's something that's really helpful. And then one other thing I'll tell you about, and then we'll jump into our 100th episode material. Nan and I in February are the featured speakers for a Family Life event called Empowered to Love. It's a getaway for couples. We're not doing a cruise this February. We're doing a land cruise. I think we're going to be at, get this, the Hilton Sandestin Beach Golf Resort and Spa in Sandestin, which is right next to Destin, Florida. You may have heard of that. This is February 13 through 17, 2023. We'd love to have you join us. The show notes will point you to how you can be a part of that. Okay, 100th episode. We got to back up and tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, Ron, how did you get started with this?
Well, I want to know how you got started in blended ministry too. Actually, our paths sort of crossed at some point.
They did a long time ago.
Yeah. So it's funny you ask, because people in Mexico City were asking me, how did you get started? Everywhere I go, people want to know.
Because they know you're not in a blended family.
That's right. I'm not in a blended family. I am the odd duck, that doesn't fit in so many ways. And my wife says, here's the punchline. My wife says I'm the male obstetrician of the step family world.
Oh,
but here's the story. A lot of people don't know about that. I was a youth pastor for 5 years, roughly, when Nan and I first got married. And I worked with kids, teenagers in a lot of different family contexts and situations. And frequently I was ill-equipped, unprepared to be able to really offer them kind of help and support. In fact, I decided to quit the ministry I loved and go back to graduate school to study marriage and family therapy. Not because I wanted to be a counselor full-time, but because I wanted to have better skill set when I'm working in ministry contexts to be able to help kids, parents, whatever. It was in graduate school studying family therapy that I got exposed to research around step families.
Okay.
What I didn't realize when I came out of graduate school and went right back into local church work. First, I went to Northern California and I took a job to be a family minister for a church there. What I didn't realize is that while marriage ministry is, sort of common, especially across evangelical churches and some Protestant and Catholic churches have marriage ministry, marriage prep, and some marriage support ministry. What I didn't realize is that nobody was doing, I shouldn't say nobody. There were a couple people out there.
Very few
that were thinking about step families and how do we help them in a local church context.
And considering how many step families are out there, that really wasn't thought about.
Right. And see, the funny thing is, people have said for years, there's no resources and materials. Well, the truth is, there has been secular research and materials for 40 years. We've known a lot about step family living from the academic standpoint, and there's been some secular materials for a long time. But it was the Christian community that was the slowest to get on board.
Wow.
And so I found myself in the early 1990s trying to figure out how to do local ministry to blended families and to single parents, by the way, in a local church. And that's how I got started. That's all it was for me. I had no vision of writing a book or teaching other people or ever doing anything where we're influencing other leaders or couples. It was another part of family ministry that I just really loved to do.
And that you obviously saw a need for.
Yes.
You recognized that this is out there. These people are needing help. They're not necessarily finding it. Mm-hmm. And this is an area.
And honestly, I still think I'm doing youth ministry even today.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's how I got started, and that's how I still think of it. Because if I'm helping somebody have a stronger marriage, that's helping their kids.
Oh, absolutely.
Indirectly and directly oftentimes. If we're preventing a re-divorce,
yes,
we're helping children. We know that the toll of serial divorce on kids is really significant.
It is.
So if we can, one divorce has happened, let's not have two.
Right. Oh, for sure.
And not only not have a divorce, let's make the family healthy and strong so that the kids can grow up and the remainder of their childhood experience can be a redemptive experience for them.
And it can be.
That whole mentality is all I had when I started.
Wow.
I didn't know what to do or how to do it. We fumbled our way through for a number of years.
And how many years ago was that, would you say?
So I started really doing this in 1993.
Okay. Wow.
So we're a couple of months away from 30 years as we're recording this.
Can you believe that?
I can't hardly believe it. I really can't. And again, there was nothing glorious about it. There was nothing interesting about it. We were just sort of doing that in a local church in one little spot in the universe. And the Lord blessed it.
Well, and I have to believe that you were following the Lord's guidance as you took step by step in your own ministry, in your own going back to graduate school, all of that, I'm sure.
Well, I really tried. Nan and I were prayerful about it. But I'll tell you, the funny part is I recognize how I felt ill-equipped and really like I didn't belong because I wasn't a part of a step family.
Sure.
Now, I'm married. That we have in common with blended couples. I have kids. That's something we have in common. Nan and I would go on and have a great loss in our life. So we understand loss and its impact on our lives. And so there's some things I can definitely relate to on a personal level, but I still stand outside the circle. And I've told people I started this way and I'm still sort of doing this. I'm just helping people understand the process from an objective, neutral, outsider position. People like you are so advantageous to our ministry because you've got an insider point of view. You've lived it, been there, done that, and you've got experiences I've never have. And you can tell those, and those are relatable. I sort of talk about this experience and that, and here's another point of view for people that are in a different family situation. So the combination, I think, is just...
That's very helpful because I think in your situation, sometimes you can be a little more objective because you can see it from more than one side. Sometimes I think about my story, but that's only my story. I have to also consider the viewpoint and the stories of others that have walked blended family life, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So I'm always kind of comparing my story against other stories that I also know about that might not be exactly like mine. So I feel like, there's an advantage to both sides of that.
It's exactly. We need all of it. If there are 67 different configurations of blended families and you're living one of them, you've got to work hard. I'm talking to our listeners right now who are mentors and teachers and trainers. You got to work hard to not get stuck in your own point of view.
Exactly.
So you can relate to other people sitting in the room. And so that's a challenge that we all have. So I started doing this. We moved to another church, a little bit bigger church in a different community, but we kept doing single parent ministry and step family ministry as a part of the bigger family ministry that I was in charge of. It was in that second context that I went beyond graduate school and got some advanced training from some experts in step families.
Oh, okay.
I got some advanced training in step family therapy. I was doing a lot of counseling, but I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I sort of just dove into whatever I could find. And somewhere along that path, I figured I'd start writing an article or two and see what happened. I'd get invited to go do a little workshop and I'd go do that. And that would lead to another one and another one. And then a ministry group would say, come train our leaders. And over the course of, 10 or 12 years, it just grew to take over my life to the point where we started Smart Step Families. That's the brand that I have and still have today. SmartStepFamilies.com is Still the website where you can find everything that I'm involved in, from live events to virtual stuff and resources. And that was all born probably in the early 2000s. By 2006, it had taken over my life to the point where Nan and I decided we needed to leave local church ministry. I quit my day job, which was
scary.
Was that scary? We had no insurance.
Oh gosh.
I had a friend who was doing some family ministry and some counseling in a church in Amarillo, Texas. We were living in Jonesboro, Arkansas. He said, "Come move to Amarillo." If you've ever been to Amarillo, it's the end. It's not the end of the earth, but you can see it from there.
I've lived in Amarillo.
Oh my goodness. It is flat and ugly.
It is.
It's not Arkansas.
Right.
Hills and mountains and beautiful. But we moved there, and I did Smart Step Families full time for about 6 years. And then I finally got a phone call from Bob Lapine, actually, who worked right-hand man with Dennis Rainey here at Family Life. And I'd gotten to know them. Every time I'd write a book, they'd have me on the radio program, Family Life Today, to talk about it. So we sort of got to know each other a little bit over the years. I actually ambushed Dennis Rainey in 1990. Do you want to hear a funny story?
Oh, gosh.
I want to say 1999. I drove to Little Rock from Jonesboro, Arkansas, to get on a plane to fly down to Houston, where I was going to do a conference for what turned out to be about 30 people.
Oh, okay.
I was at a church down there, and a guy invited me to come down and spend a whole day. It was the first time I'd done a 6-hour seminar.
And it was on just step families.
That's just on step families.
Okay.
And so I drive to Little Rock, I get on an airplane, and I sit down on the plane, and I look up, and Dennis Rainey is getting on the airplane. Now, I have this immediate thought. I'd been listening to Dennis on Family Life Today. I'd used some of their resources from Family Life to do local ministry where we were doing that. And so I was very familiar with him.
Sure.
He didn't know who I was. So as he went by me on the airplane, I'm seated. As he walks by me, I say to him, "Hi, my name is Ron. I know who you are, but you don't know who I am, and we need to talk."
Oh, that's pretty bold, Ron. We need to talk.
And he gave me one of those looks like, who is this guy? and is he going to hurt me? I mean, he just sort of looked at me odd and went past.
Oh, gosh.
And sat down on the plane about 3 or 4 rows behind me.
Wow.
We were flying to Dallas to connect to different planes. I was going on to Houston to talk to 30 people. Turns out Dennis was connecting to Denver to speak at a little thing called Promise Keepers, where he had 50,000 men.
I was going to say a little more than 30 people there, huh?
But we got off the plane at DFW Airport, and I stood and I waited for him to get off because I got off first.
Oh, gosh.
He came off. He walked right up to me. He said, "So tell me who you are." And I said, "I'm a family minister. I work with a church in Jonesboro. What is Family Life doing for step families?" And I'll never forget his answer. This is in 1999. Okay. I wouldn't come to work for Family Life until 2012.
Wow. Okay.
He says, "Nothing. We don't have a clue. We don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, I got a few ideas. We've been doing step family ministry, and it's going really well. And lives are being changed. And would you care to talk about it sometime?"
And good for him for his honesty.
Yes. Yes. And he said, "Give me your number." He called me the next week, arranged a time. Within 2 weeks, I drove back to Little Rock to sit in his office and have lunch and talk. And we started sharing ideas. And that was the beginning of our relationship that led to radio, and then doing more radio and getting to know each other. And eventually to Family Life was ready to say, "We want to start a division. And would you please come and lead it?" And that brought me here in 2012.
So really, you just introduced the idea to Family Life about the need of serving step families. But it took
a long
13 years.
A long time.
Before they would recognize they needed someone on staff.
Before it put money, time, energy, staff into the whole idea.
Wow.
And, still to this day, we're the only major marriage and family ministry, to my knowledge, in the world, not just in the U.S., but in the world, that has a division, an initiative specifically designed to help blended families. But we want to change that. We're trying to help everybody out there.
We do. We're trying to
do this sort of thing. Now, you and I met.
We did.
I was living in Jonesboro doing seminars and conferences whenever I got an invitation.
Right.
And you were living?
We were in Conway. Randy and I were pretty early in our marriage, in our blended family marriage, and we were struggling. And I knew a little bit about, by then you had already started doing a few step family conferences.
You heard about me somehow.
Yes, on the radio or something. And I just asked, would you consider doing a conference at our church in Conway?
Yeah. So for our listeners, Jonesboro and Conway, about 2 hours apart. Right. Conway's sort of just outside where Little Rock is, where we are today. And so I said, yeah. So I came to Conway, and you guys sponsored an event. I met Randy, your husband.
You did, right?
Great guy.
Oh, yeah. And it was a small event, but it was a great event. And just for us, it helped me know more about, gave us some tools for step family life, but also kind of connected us to something that could continue to help us and inspired us to get involved in a small group. And that was another thing. That's why I'm still such an advocate of small groups for step family couples, because you share, you use a material. Now, Ron, your Smart Step Family was not out yet.
It wasn't.
We used Dick Dunn's New Faces in the Frame.
Great resource. It's out of print now, but it was wonderful. I know.
It was wonderful. And that just helped to get us on the road really for beginning to experience some wins in our step family.
Now, you've been a writer about marriage and family and motherhood and things for a long time. And as I recall, had you started writing about step family living?
Well, back then we were just trying to survive.
Yes.
Honestly, we were just living the life and trying to understand how to take the next step, how to stay married another year.
Yes.
There were times I wasn't sure we were going to, but eventually, especially after we participated in that small group, and I began dabbling in writing a little bit. And so I did. I actually joined the FamilyLife Writers Group. There was a writers group up here that met once a month, and I became part of that. That was my first introduction to family life. And the great people here and other writers who I feel like were instrumental in helping me, but then also kind of kept us connected a little bit. I would know more about what you were doing. And then I began to go back and think about when I was first in my stepmom role, I looked so hard for a devotional for stepmoms, and I couldn't find one. There was not one out there. And so full circle, several years later, I just decided, well, I'm going to write one. I mean, step parents still need a devotional book.
Yep.
And that was how I got started as far as doing the writing part of specifically for blended families, step couples, stepmoms.
And to our listener, if you're not familiar with Step Parenting with Grace, that's Gayla's devotional. Really, really well done. Highly recommend it. It's one of the resources we sell here at Family Life. So you got started. You got your feet wet, started stepping into that space. And I became aware of that, watched you from a distance, and certainly encouraged what you were doing and in whatever ways that I could. There's a odd little connection here. You lived in Conway, Arkansas. You used to go to a Christian bookstore.
Oh, yes.
There in Conway. And it turns out somebody we're going to introduce our listeners to in just a minute, who's integral to our ministry here, FamilyLife Blended, was managing that bookstore. So all sorts of little God connections and things happening behind the scenes that eventually would all come together. We'll tell you more about Nicole and let you talk to her in just a minute. But then there's one other thing. People always wonder, so what happened? Smart Step Families, Ron, you were out doing your thing. And then Family Life said, come join. And I like to say Family Life and Smart Step Families got married and formed a blended family. And we had a baby, and that baby was called Family Life Blended.
Oh, goodness.
And so that's what has led to the work today. And when our team started, it was very small.
It was.
Actually, I was alone. I was the department for about, close to a year. And then I started getting some administrative support and help and started working with other departments within ministry. Family Life is a large organization, 350 to 400 staff. I think it's closer to 400 at this point, all around the world, mostly in the US, but in 100 countries. And so the team started to grow, and it became very clear that we needed to add operations person, somebody who would take my crazy ideas and actually make it work, do something with it, let me teach, because that's all I'm good at, but somebody else who could really run the ministry. And that is Nicole Burns. And we're going to bring her in to our conversation here. It's so great to have you with us, finally, behind the microphone, joining us on one of the episodes. Would you mind just tell our listeners a little bit about the role that you play?
Sure. I'm the ministry manager. So basically, I take care of all the operations on our team. So whether that's resources or events or podcasts, I, like Ron said, take all of his ideas and then try to make them happen.
Or tell me they can't happen. One of the
That happens sometimes.
Yeah, so you got to manage Ron. That's a big job, Nicole.
You have no idea, Gayla.
That's why she gets the big bucks. So what are the many things that FamilyLife Blended is doing?
Yeah, we do events. We train ministry leaders, so events for ministry leaders, but then also events for couples. And of course, since COVID, we've really branched out and started expanding what we're able to offer virtually. So that's one of our big things that we've been doing since I got on board. Then, of course, we have the podcast, which you guys are all aware of. We also do resources. So Ron does books. We've done digital curriculum and things of that nature. And then, of course, Ron and Gayla both do radio and other events that are outside of family life that we help provide resources for and really try to promote what we're doing here at FamilyLife Blended.
It's a lot.
See why we needed somebody?
Oh, absolutely. And Nicole's great at what she does.
She is really good at what she does. We appreciate her very, very much. Thanks for jumping in today. We know you're more comfortable, not behind the microphone, putting other people behind the microphone?
Yes, shoving others on stage is what I like to say.
And to anybody who ever comes to our Summit on Step Family Ministry or our Blended and Blessed live stream, but you can come to the live audience, you'll get to meet Nicole, and she can tell you how hard it is to wrangle me. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate you. You know, Nicole's not the only person. First of all, we have to thank Bob Lapine, who was the longtime co-host of Family Life Today, Family Life's national radio program that still is in existence today. Bob was one of the original hosts. He decided that Family Life needed a podcast network. So this is one of many podcasts that our ministry produces. And so Bob helped us get started and, set the vision and taught me a little bit about how to do radio, do podcasting and all that. We're very grateful for him. He's actually going to be on an upcoming podcast, so I hope you'll keep listening. But we have to have a team of people who actually work behind the scenes. Marcus Holt is our producer. If people listen all the way to the end of the podcast, you hear these names every time because I want to give them credit where credit is due. And Marcus is our producer, how would you describe Marcus and what his job is?
Well, Marcus can be kind of candid in telling us what he likes or doesn't like and what we need to change.
That's exactly right. It's his job, right? To make us sound good. And then he does all the audio editing, taking out all the mistakes.
Yes.
And fixing things and trying to make them right and working with our guests and getting them prepared and sending them equipment ahead of time so that they can be sitting in their home or wherever it is that they are.
And he just makes us sound better, Ron.
He does.
He takes out things that don't need to be in there. So,
it's great.
Very helpful.
We got a guy named Jarrett Roski who works in our, Marcus is in our Orlando office as well. So both Jarrett and Marcus work down in Orlando, and Jarrett does what's called mastering, and I have no idea what it is.
I don't know either.
It's one of those cool audio things that makes it sound pristine and awesome and broadcast worthy, and then gets it in the right format, I think, to upload into Apple and all the other podcasts. So we appreciate the high tech.
Needs to be done.
That he does. And then there's Ann and Caro. She works in our Little Rock office here with our team here in Family Life here in Little Rock. And she is all things guest relations.
And that's a huge job.
Part of the strategy planning team, handles all the logistics. Like I just would go nuts if I had to do all that.
Well, even scheduling or rescheduling. She is always having to contact guests and try to coordinate schedules. It's a lot.
She tracks each podcast with titling and show notes and detail. We're very grateful for her. And then if you listen to the end of each podcast, I give credit to my son, Braden.
That's great.
He is a music composer for film and TV. He's actually out in LA. Say a prayer for him. He's trying to make it in the film industry and he's writing music for all things, video. And has got a burgeoning career there, but he's written the music for us. He's written the theme for Family Life Today. He's written the theme for at least one of the other podcasts in our network. So that's the kind of work that he does, and I love him a lot. So I got to give him
kudos.
It's
It's good stuff. The music is great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Okay. Well, that's the behind the scenes stuff. Hope it's interesting to you. Again, there's a lot of moving parts, and now you understand why we appreciate a donation every now and then.
All right.
To keep all that moving.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your favorites? Let's talk about the podcasts that have, left a good residue on you.
Yeah. Well, so out of 100, there's a lot to choose from, aren't there?
There are.
First on my list, though, is number 27, which is Sandy Patty and her husband, Don Pesselis. The title of that podcast was Beyond Broken. And I think the reason I love that is because they are so transparent about their story and how they started from brokenness and yet how God redeemed their relationships. And they just really are honest and open about what God has done in their lives, and as a result of it, the changes in their blended family. And Ron, they have a ton of kids.
Yes, they do.
Which just makes blended family life so more complicated, so much more.
Yes, and they didn't start in the best way, and they are very candid about that.
Right.
And so it set their relationship, in a rocky direction, and with their former spouses, and so there was a lot to overcome.
It was.
Great episode.
Yeah.
I would recommend that. Okay, so the first one I thought of is the very first episode.
Really?
This goes back, let me see, 99 episodes to number 1. Dave Bondison. I interviewed him. He's a stepdad. He had this little comment where it's about identity that's just stuck with me. He grew up and his dad used to say to him, son, you're a Bondison and you're a Christian. We're a Christian family. There was this sense of connectedness to this history that his family had. So the last name and the type of people that they were, believers in Jesus. And boom, he finds himself waking up one day as a stepfather to a young lady, stepdaughter, and her last name is not Bondison. His whole life he dreamed of passing that on to his kids.
Right.
And now he's going, I can't.
Wow.
She's not a Bondison. No, she's a believer. I'm a believer. Like we have that connection there. But what do I do with this reality that she has a different last name? That really speaks to the challenge of building family identity in step-family relationships. You don't even have the same last name, figuratively or literally. And so he talked about that journey for him, how he had to try to maneuver within that and work with her. And I just think that is an incredible concept and idea, and I would highly recommend it to our listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
You got another one?
Yeah, another one I really like is one that Brian and Diane Fromm did about grief. Diane walked into that family after there had been the death of her husband's first spouse. And so she really encountered some difficult dynamics in trying to parent grieving stepchildren.
Grieving specifically meaning that their parent had died.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And so I just think there's a lot there for those who are in that specific situation in regards to grief and grieving stepkids.
Good stuff. I think at number 6 on challenging co-parent situations and parent alienation, Gayla actually had a professional parent alienation coach tell me that was one of the best single things she's ever heard on the subject. It wasn't because of me, it's the people we interviewed and the quality of the material that they shared. We still recommend that to people who write into us, who tell us they have problems with alienation going on between the households with the children. Highly recommend that to you. I just want to say, wow, alienation is emotional terrorism.
I know.
It's just horrible. Awful. It needs to stop. We're trying to address that in a small way on that episode, but we also want to encourage and support the people who are living under it. So if that touches your life or anybody you know, tell them about that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And another one's episode number 80 that was titled Biomom, Stepmom Turnaround Story. If you live in blended families, you understand how contentious a biomom and stepmom relationship can be. And that was really the subject of this episode, was about, yes, these two women started out in a very contentious relationship. Yeah. And yet they found a way to come together and really form a bond that benefited them, benefited their kids, benefited their husbands. I mean, it's just a great story of how you don't have to stay stuck in those relationships in a negative way.
Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah. That was number 80.
Hey, number 9, Step Parenting with Grace.
Oh, yeah.
Gayla's, I think it was your first one.
It was.
On the episode. And Randy was with you.
He was. Yeah.
And he's just quality. I like Randy a lot. And he's really got good things to say. It's not like we were interviewing you and he was just tagging along. You both are so good together.
Well, I mean, he's a step parent also. We talked a lot about teenagers when we were in those hard teenager years. And Randy's got some stories too from his perspective.
He does. He does. That's a good one. Okay. And then you and I both picked number 11.
Yes.
With Michelle Couchat. If you've not listened to that one, you really need to. Michelle wrote a book. Essentially, the heart of the message is learning to live and make peace with the life you have.
Right.
Not the life you wish you had. That is so hard. I mean, everybody listening right now, I venture to say, has at least one disappointment in your life, if not a major, significant disappointment.
Sure.
For me, it's the loss of a child. I'd love to write that one all over again and just write it out of the script.
Of course.
I wouldn't want to live with that. So how do I make peace with this idea that it's true? I wake up 13 and a half years later, we're coming up on 14. It's still true.
Yeah.
So what do I do with that? Like, how do I submit that into the will of God every single day? Like, that is a challenging thing. So whether it's divorce or the death of a partner, and now you find yourself in a blended family situation for your kids, what do you wish were different for them? That's the heart of that conversation. Is that what you liked about it?
Yeah. And there are these situations that you can't fix. You can't change the fact that happened with Connor.
Yeah.
And Michelle has walked that road with other things, a 3-time cancer survivor. And so she really talks about how she found contentment even in the midst of really hard circumstances. And I think that's what it's about, because in blended family life, we do walk through hard circumstances, and we can't just keep living for, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So how do you find contentment in today?
Again, episode number 11, Undone is the name of the episode. Let me encourage you, listener, to check that one out. And I just want to say this about Michelle. She doesn't, no platitudes. She doesn't make it sound easy. She didn't just say, trust God and it'll be okay. No, it's real life struggle and hard. And in the midst of that, somehow finding faith. So good stuff.
Oh, very good stuff. And then the holiday one that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
That's another one.
It made your list?
Yes. So it's number 45 with Bob and Vicki Madej, and specifically about adult kids in blended family life. And they are also candid about, they may not have done everything exactly right, and how it impacts your family, but also how you work through those hard situations.
A lot of people might be surprised. One of our most listened to podcasts was with Ryan and Jessica Ronnie, episode number 67, called Blended with Grit. Each of them lost their first spouse to a rare brain cancer. They each started blogging about the loss of their spouse, and a mutual friend who was reading both their blogs said, hey, you guys ought to meet. They ended up getting married, forming a blended family. And on the day they got married, they had 22 grandparents connected to their children.
22!
You want to talk about a complex blended family situation? This was an amazing conversation with a family with a whole lot of stuff that they had to wrestle with. Something about the widowhood. I don't know. A lot of people listened to that one and downloaded it. If you haven't heard it, you might want to give it a go. Episode number 67.
Wow.
You got one more?
One more. Number 44 is all about a drift in marriage and how there's times that the differences that you and your spouse have might create drift. Could be the step family differences and changes and things that you're walking through. And at some point, you can become disconnected from your spouse. And it really talks about just how to overcome that. Maybe if you're feeling emotionally abandoned in your marriage, how to work through that and how to overcome it.
Was that the conversation with Greg Smalley?
Neil and
the Josephsons.
Yes.
Josephsons. From FamilyLife Canada.
Yes.
Great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Here's what we want you to gain. We want you to be encouraged. We want you to feel equipped to do life. And we want you to find hope for your marriage and for your family. We believe blended families done well are redemptive, are healthy, are helpful, changes the generations from a pathway that perhaps was leading to fracturing and destruction to something that leads to life. We believe that, but we also believe that blended families done poorly leads to more heartache,
right,
chaos, and difficulty, in particular for kids and the next generation. So we want to help you get it right. We want to help you live as best you can under the lordship of Jesus. And I think the payoff is well worth it.
And I think we do it from an angle that is real life, from the trenches, perhaps you could even say. So to help normalize some of the things that go on in blended family homes.
Yeah, we're not going to sugarcoat it.
No.
Because that's not real life.
Right.
Well, if you're listening and this is the first time you've heard this podcast, this one's a little different, a little odd, but we're glad that you're here. We certainly want to encourage you to subscribe, to not miss any more, and scroll through that list, 99 of them. Find a topic that interests you and start listening. Would encourage you to do that. And if you got a friend, tell them about it, because everybody can benefit from somebody coming alongside saying, hey, this helped me. Maybe this can help you as well.
And it's easy to find. FamilyLife.com/blended. You'll see all of our resources and podcasts and things there.
As always, the show notes will get you connected real easily. Just hit that subscribe button or listen online. Okay, next time we are going to have a special Christmas edition of Family Life Blended, and I hope you'll join me for a special guest. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Gayla for being with me today.
Good to be here.
Family Life Blended is part of the Family Life Podcast Network, helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.
See you next time.